curious person once said, what's the difference between macros and functions? What should I be using? Is one of them more optimal than the other? Is there really a downside to either of them? And hopefully that curious person is you, because that's what we're talking about today. Functions versus macros. This is a detailed explanation. We're going to be going over sort of the key differences between these two tools, when you should kind of be using them, and what sort of benefits each of them apply. Because there's not really one go-to answer. One of them isn't just the one that you should be using all the time. It's really dependent on what you're trying to accomplish. But I don't see a lot of people talking about sort of the broad differences. So I just kind of wanted to get into that today. So first of all, why are we using functions or macros? The event graph is fantastic. Why can't we just put all of our stuff there and not even worry about this at all? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, saves time, right? You don't want to ever really be writing the same code twice if you can avoid it. So using functions and macros to sort of keep your repeatable code in a nice, friendly manner is really useful. It also helps readability, right? If you're working on a project with multiple people, having your functions named really well or your macros named really well can sort of help summarize a large amount of code into just like one specific event. It can also help you later down the line if you're just working solo, coming back to a file you haven't opened in a while. It can kind of help with like your commenting, right? And then also like global updating, right? You might want to change a mechanic somewhere in your project, and it's really annoying to go through and change how it works everywhere you've put it if you're not just kind of encapsulating all of your feature into one or a couple functions. So between macros and functions, there's kind of two key differences that I think we should be aware of before we start getting into the sort of smaller things. Every kind of difference really boils down to one of these two things. So the first is compilation, right? That's kind of a scary word if you're a beginner, but it's, we're not going to get too deep into the weeds here. But basically, you kind of imagine your function or your macros like a box of Legos, right? And so you're taking all of your code, your Lego pieces, and you're throwing them into a box. And if this is a macro, when you compile your project, Unreal will basically take out your box for however many times you've put that macro in. So if you have this macro in 5 places, it'll take 5 boxes of the same Lego set, dump them all on the table, and build the Lego set 5 times, right? Whereas if you use a function, it'll take the Lego set, it'll build it, and then anywhere you've used that function, it'll put the completed kind of Lego set in place. Maybe that was a bad analogy. Let me show you another example if that didn't make a lot of sense. All right, so right here I got this macro, right? This is my really good macro. This is one we all use all the time, obviously, that takes this sound.
In this next step, we'll do some interesting stuff.
And then it plays it again over top of itself 10 times at random different pitches. Obviously, this is an incredibly useful macro that we're all using constantly. So this is kind of what this looks like in the event graph, right? If I just kind of put this macro here. But when I compile, what Unreal is doing here is it's actually taking all of this kind of under the hood, and it's copying it, and it's pasting it here. So then when the project runs,
in this next
it goes
we'll
through and
interesting stuff.
does it. Yeah, it does that. So if you were to have this macro used, 4 times in a row like this, which I'm not going to play, under the hood, it looks like this, right? So it gets really long and complicated. Obviously, like, this isn't gonna cause like a crash, right? This is a very powerful engine. This isn't like a huge problem, but it's just something you should be aware of, right? So if you are making a massive macro, or if you have a massive amount of work that you need to be done in one single event or function, it's actually better to use a function because functions only get compiled one time, right? So if I have my really good function, this is another really useful one that tells you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and then spawns 100 door frames in random positions around the map. So if I have this here, it will just compile this function the one time, and then anytime it's referenced, it'll just point to that function, right? So if I string 5 of these functions together, instead of copy and pasting all of that code over and over again, what the engine actually does is something a little bit more like this, where it takes compiles all of this code and then just repeats it, right? It's already done it the one time, so it knows to sort of point back to what it's done previously. That's kind of just a visual representation. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's sort of the meat and potatoes of it. And so that's actually one of the biggest important differences between macros and functions, right? Since macros are just copy and pasting your code, it makes it so you can't call a reference to a macro in another blueprint. So if I make a macro in my player, I can't just call that macro from another blueprint, because it's not really like a piece of code somewhere. It is just pasting all of that code loosely. So it doesn't really, it's not able to be like communicated and like executed from another blueprint. Whereas a function you can, right? I've defined that function in my player. So now like whatever, my enemy can call to that same like reference, right? It already knows that the Lego set has been built. It can talk about that specific set. It's not going to try to take all of the pieces and build it remotely. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's kind of the first sort of key difference there. That one is really important. The second key difference here is execution time. Now, this is something that's a lot less complicated than the first key difference, but basically, because the macros are pasting all of the nodes kind of under the hood, like we talked about, the timing plays out a lot differently, and you get the ability to use stuff like delays or latent events inside your macros. But functions are designed to execute from start to finish in 1 frame or less. So that's why you can't use things like delays or retriggable delays or any sort of kind of latent loading from within a function. And yeah, I mean that's kind of the story there. Now that being said, there are actually a lot of really useful things you can do inside a function that you can't do inside of a macro. The sort of main thing here is local variables, right? So if I have some sort of operation that I know is going to be kind of handled a lot inside this function, like maybe this is a like health or like a tick damage kind of thing. Probably not a tick damage thing, actually, because that would be like a timer. So I don't know, maybe this is like a healing thing, and I know that I'm going to be affecting health a lot inside this function. I can make like a local variable and make that a float. And now I can use this inside of my function, and this will get reset every time the function is run. So that can really help the cleanup of your project. You're not going to end up with a ton of variables. You can sort of reduce that number by having them be localized within inside a function. Macros can do something similar, but it's a little bit less optimized and can be kind of annoying. So with inside of a macro, you can still have like a local value. Right, so like let's say this was like a tick damage thing. You can add this node called local float. Yeah, local float here. And so the kind of issue with this is that this node is a new value for every node, right? So if I have 2 of these, this is now 2 local variables, right? And if I want to assign a value to it, I can do assign here, and this is kind of like your set float kind of function. And so if you want to do a ton of stuff with the same local variable, you end up having to drag this out a ton of times and use this exact same node, and this will end up having a ton of wires coming out of it, and it's really, really hard to keep a large macro clean. That being said, for the kind of previous reasons we discussed, you do want to keep your macros as small as possible anyways. So it's not like the end of the world, but it's just, a little thing that's like kind of annoying that I think the functions definitely handled better. Now, 2 quick other benefits for macros is that they can have multiple execution outputs. And you can sort of just add new ones as if you were adding like an output pin. And this can be useful for like flow control. So if you want to make your own kind of custom true or false statements or branches or iteration loops, that's a really useful thing that macros can help with. And that's kind of one of the key things that I end up using them for, is just flow control, right? If I know that I'm going to have like a statement that I'm checking for a lot, like, can the player reload? Instead of doing all of my checks and adding a branch every time I want to do like a reload check, I can put that all inside of a macro and basically make a reload branch. So I can have, all of my logic like here, can reload, and then can't reload, right? And then maybe I'll put like a branch here, and then all of my logic that checks to see if I can reload, like, okay, do I have, less than my maximum ammo? Am I, on the ground? Maybe there's like a reload timer, reload cooldown. I could put all that within here. And then anytime I would be doing a reload check, I can use my, cool new function now, or my new macro, excuse me, and kind of use that as a branch, right? So that's like a super powerful thing you could do with macros. That's kind of like the main thing that I think they're the most useful for. Another thing worth mentioning in regards to execution is that while functions cannot have multiple execution pins, you can make it so they have no execution pin. To do that, you just kind of click on the function and check pure. And so what this does is it kind of converts that function into one of these green ones, so they don't have like an input pin. Something you should note here is this should really only ever be used for like retrieving data or converting it to something different. You should not use this to change something within your game, right? So you're not going to ever want to use this to like set your health or do like an event or like activate a mechanic, and that's due to kind of how they're called. Now, it won't stop you from doing this, right? Like that is something that, you can technically do from within the engine. It can just cause a lot of problems because of how these pure functions are called. So just kind of take note of that. Let's hit the highlights one more time before we wrap up for the day. So functions can be called by other blueprints. So again, that's like if you have a function in your player, you can call that function to be executed from another blueprint as long as you have a reference to your player. Functions have a really convenient access to local variables, and they're compiled only one time, so they're more efficient to be used with like large amounts of code. Macros, they can contain latent functions like delays. They can have multiple execution pins, and both macros and functions are useful for code legibility. They make your systems more scalable, and they can have no execution pins if you need that. Efficient game systems are built on the backs of functions and macros, making sure that you have your systems really replicatable and easy to use. It's important, right? When you're making a game, you got to think about it like you're making a set of tools to work with, right? When you encounter a mechanic and you think just for a minute, oh, you know what? I might be able to reuse this code again somewhere. Collapse that into a macro. Collapse it into a function, whatever's going to be the best for that specific mechanic. Make sure that you're reusing your stuff. It'll save you time. It makes everything more legible. Do it. Thanks for taking the time to check out the video. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like. And if you really liked it, consider subscribing. That would be great. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'd love to check it out. If you have any other things that you want to know about regarding Unreal, let me know. I'll make a video about it. Cheers. Have a great day. Go Lions.